Dennis Tink Bell was 25 years old when he fell into a crevasse on King George Island. For decades, he remained frozen deep beneath the ice, lost to one of the most remote and unforgiving landscapes on Earth. But this year, as a glacier retreated, a Polish scientific team made a startling discovery. His body, preserved almost exactly as it had been the day he disappeared. It was 1959, the height of the Antarctic exploration era. Bell, a young British meteorologist, had been posted to a windswept research outpost, part of a mission to study weather patterns in one of the harshest environments on the planet. On a clear but blindingly bright morning, he set out with a small team across the ice, carefully navigating the treacherous ground. The danger here wasn't always visible. Beneath the snow lay cracks and voids big enough to swallow a manhole. Bell had walked this terrain before. He knew the rules, the safety procedures, the importance of every measured step. But the Antarctic doesn't negotiate. One moment, he was there. The next, the snow beneath him gave way. Shouts echoed through the wind. Ropes were lowered. Lights probed the darkness of the crevasse. But the drop was too deep, the walls too sheer, and the temperature too brutal. After days of desperate searching, the team had no choice. The ice had taken him. For 66 years, his story was a footnote in Antarctic history, a cautionary tale whispered among researchers, until the ice began to melt. The same climate shift that is reshaping our world unlocked the past, revealing a man frozen in time. This is the story of Dennis Tink Bell, the day he vanished, the decades of silence that followed, and how a changing planet finally gave him back. Dennis Tink Bell was a young British meteorologist, barely 25 years old, when he joined one of the most ambitious scientific expeditions of the late 1950s. Born and raised in England, Bell had shown an early fascination with weather patterns and atmospheric science, passion that eventually led him to the doorstep of one of the most extreme environments on Earth, Antarctica. The mission Bell signed up for was no simple scientific jaunt. It was part of a broader effort during the International Geophysical Year, 1957-1958, a remarkable global initiative where nations put aside rivalries to collaborate in understanding the planet's geophysical phenomena. The Antarctic expeditions were central to this effort, as the continent held secrets that could help scientists unlock mysteries about climate, magnetic fields, and ocean currents. Bell's specific role was to collect and analyze meteorological data temperature readings, wind speeds, pressure changes that would feed into global weather forecasting models, and improve navigation for ships and aircraft operating in the southern hemisphere. Every piece of data mattered in a place where conditions could shift in an instant, where a sudden storm could mean life or death. Yet Antarctica in 1959 was a forbidding place. The technology and infrastructure that modern explorers rely on were primitive or non-existent. Communications were sparse and unreliable, with radio transmissions breaking up amid the howling winds. The terrain itself was a perilous maze of ice, snow, and rock. Crevasses, deep fissures concealed by layers of snow, were a constant danger to those who traversed the icy wilderness. Bell and his colleagues endured brutal conditions. Temperatures routinely dropped to -40 degrees Celsius, -40 degrees Fahrenheit, and fierce katabatic winds swept across the ice plains with terrifying force. The isolation was profound hundreds of miles from the nearest inhabited outpost. Their survival depended on careful planning, steadfast nerves, and a bit of luck. It was in this unforgiving environment that Dennis Bell carried out his work, driven by a desire to contribute to humanity's understanding of the planet. But the same ice and snow that preserved his scientific data would, tragically, also become the final resting place of a man lost to the Antarctic wilderness, a mystery that would remain unsolved for more than 6 decades. Now, let me take you through the harrowing day when Dennis Tink Bell vanished beneath the Antarctic ice, a day marked by urgency, desperation, and the stark reminder of nature's merciless power. It was early morning when Bell and two fellow expedition members began their trek toward a remote meteorological outpost perched precariously near the edge of a vast glacier. The trio moved carefully, their boots crunching softly on the frozen surface, eyes constantly scanning for signs of unstable snow or thin ice. The glacier itself was a maze of hidden dangers. Beneath the seemingly solid, pristine white surface lurked countless crevasses, deep fissures in the ice formed by centuries of glacial movement. Some were narrow and shallow, others deep and wide enough to swallow a man whole. As Bell led the way, confidence and routine guided his steps. Years of training and experience had conditioned him to the subtle cues of danger, the faint dips in the snow, the slightest variation in texture. Yet Antarctica has a way of deceiving even the most seasoned explorers. Without warning, the fragile snow bridge beneath Bell's feet fractured. The first crack was almost silent, a whisper lost in the Antarctic wind. Then, with a sudden collapse, the surface gave way entirely. Bell disappeared. His colleagues stood frozen for a moment, horror-stricken. The void beneath them was a dark, icy chasm, swallowing their teammate with terrifying finality. Shouts echoed into the cold air, but no answer came. The only sound was the wind, howling as if mourning the loss. Instinct took over. The two men scrambled to the crevasse's edge, searching frantically for any sign of Bell. His fall had been deep, and the jagged ice walls shimmered ominously in the weak sunlight. Time was of the essence. Ropes were hurriedly secured. One of the men began the perilous descent, inching down the narrow crevasse with trembling hands and frozen fingers, eyes sharp for any movement or trace. But the crevasse was a labyrinth of ice twisting and narrowing unpredictably. The rescuers' progress was agonizingly slow, hampered by sharp ice shards and the risk of falling debris. Below, silence reigned. As the minutes stretched into hours, the Antarctic weather turned merciless. Clouds gathered, and snow began to fall, swiftly transforming the landscape into a swirling white tempest. Visibility dropped to near zero. The cold deepened, seeping into bones and machinery alike. Attempts to communicate with the base camp became sporadic and unreliable. The harsh environment isolated the team further, forcing them to weigh the peril of continuing the rescue against the lives of the rescuers themselves. Despite their determination, the rescuers found no trace of Bell. His fall had likely carried him far beneath the snow surface, hidden beneath a chilling blanket of ice. Exhaustion, cold, and fading hope gnawed at the team. After exhaustive efforts, and with the storm intensifying, the grim decision was made to halt the rescue. The two men retreated from the crevasse, carrying the unbearable weight of failure and loss. The frozen silence of Antarctica swallowed Bell's name, leaving only an unsolved mystery in its wake. For the team left behind, the incident was a haunting reminder of the unforgiving nature of the continent, where a single misstep could mean eternity beneath the ice. For decades, Antarctica held its breath. The frozen continent, so vast and inhospitable, became an unintentional mausoleum for Dennis Bell, a place where time seemed to stop, and secrets were locked beneath layers of ice that refused to budge. It's strange to think how a place so full of life microbes thriving in ice, animals surviving against all odds, can also feel like the ultimate void, a silent tomb where even the most tragic human stories disappear without a trace. What was it like for the team back then, living with the unanswered questions? Did they imagine Bell was still out there somewhere beneath that ice? Or did the relentless silence slowly sink in, pushing hope away? The story of Bell's disappearance didn't just vanish. It morphed into something almost mythic among the Antarctic community. New explorers and scientists heard the whispers. A young meteorologist swallowed by the ice. A grim reminder that even the best prepared can be claimed by this land. But I wonder, how do you live with such stories? Do they fuel your determination or cast a shadow over every step you take on that frozen ground? No one could reach Bell for decades. The continent offered no mercy, no clues. And the fact that his disappearance remained unresolved for so long speaks volumes about the challenge of exploring such a place. Even with today's advanced technology, ice shifts and hides things well beyond human reach. It makes me question how much of Antarctica's past, and perhaps even present, will remain forever out of sight. During those silent decades, Bell became more than a name. He was a symbol. Maybe not just of tragedy, but of human vulnerability, of the thin line between discovery and disaster. Did the explorers who followed him feel his presence? Was his story a silent companion on their journeys? A warning etched into the ice? And here's a thought that crosses my mind. What drives us to keep pushing into places that have already claimed lives? Is it curiosity, ambition, or something deeper, a desire to conquer the unknown, no matter the cost? Bell's story forces us to confront that question without easy answers. Antarctica's decades of silence weren't just about absence. They were about a frozen memory, waiting patiently for a moment when the ice would finally reveal its secret. And while it took over 60 years, that moment eventually came, changing how we understand this story forever. Decades had passed, and the frozen world of Antarctica remained mostly unchanged, an endless white expanse that swallowed time and memory alike. But nature, as it often does, had its own way of rewriting history. In 2025, a quiet transformation began. The steady, relentless melting of a glacier that had guarded its secrets for more than half a century. It was a Polish scientific research team conducting climate and glaciological studies that first noticed the subtle changes. The glacier's edge was receding faster than anticipated, exposing patches of ancient ice and snow that had once been locked away. Among these exposed surfaces, something caught their attention: shapes that were unmistakably human. The discovery sent a ripple through the small community of Antarctic researchers. As they approached the site, what they found was startling. Fragments of bones, clothing remnants, and equipment partially embedded in the ice. These remains were unlike any recent loss. They belonged to someone long gone, a ghost from a forgotten past. Identifying the remains would not be straightforward. The extreme cold had preserved the body, but exposure to the elements over decades complicated the forensic process. The team immediately contacted international authorities specializing in cold case identifications. DNA samples were carefully extracted and sent for analysis, while historians and archivists pored over expedition records and missing persons reports. The pieces began to fit together. The clothing matched the style and materials used in British expeditions of the late 1950s. The gear corresponded with meteorological equipment from that era. DNA tests eventually confirmed what many had hoped but dared not say aloud. These were indeed the remains of Dennis Tink Bell, the young meteorologist who had vanished so many years ago. The moment of confirmation was bittersweet. Relief mingled with sorrow as the decades of silence were finally broken. For Bell's family, long bereaved yet left with unanswered questions, this discovery was a painful closure. For the scientific community, it was a profound reminder of Antarctica's unforgiving nature and the fragile lives entwined with its frozen wilderness. It's fascinating and somewhat humbling how nature played the ultimate role in this resolution. Human efforts had once failed to find Bell, limited by the harshness and vastness of the terrain. Yet after all these years, it was the slow dance of melting ice, a consequence of climate shifts, that finally unveiled the truth. This raises questions I often find myself turning over. How many other stories lie buried in glaciers and ice sheets around the world? How many mysteries wait in silent suspension, held captive by the cold, only to emerge when the Earth itself decides the time is right? The discovery also sparked renewed debates about our responsibility in these fragile environments. The melting glacier that revealed Bell's remains was a symptom of climate change, an unfolding crisis that is both revealing and erasing parts of our planet's history at once. As news of the find spread, expeditions revisited Bell's last known route, and his story gained a new chapter. Scientific journals documented the discovery. Documentaries began production. And among explorers and researchers, Bell's name was spoken with reverence and reflection, a stark emblem of endurance and loss in the face of nature's power. In the end, the glacier's slow retreat told a story beyond just one man. It spoke of time's passage, of memory preserved and lost, of nature's indifferent hand guiding the fate of human lives. Dennis Bell's frozen grave was finally exposed, not just as an end, but as a bridge connecting the past and present, reminding us all of the delicate dance between exploration and survival. Now, let me take a moment to share some important reflections on what Dennis Bell's story teaches us beyond the mystery and tragedy. Exploring polar regions is far from just an adventure. It's a battle against some of the harshest conditions on Earth. Hidden crevasses, sudden whiteouts, temperatures that can freeze skin in minutes. These are the daily threats that make every step a careful negotiation with nature. Bell's disappearance is a stark reminder that even the most experienced can fall victim to the unpredictable forces of the ice. But today, this danger is compounded by something new: climate change. The ice that once seemed eternal is melting at an unprecedented pace. This isn't just an environmental crisis. It's a phenomenon that's rewriting history literally. Glaciers retreating reveal frozen mysteries and cold cases long thought lost. Dennis Bell's remains, uncovered by melting ice, are a perfect example of how our changing planet is unveiling stories buried for decades. What does this mean for us? It raises questions about how many other secrets lie hidden beneath melting ice stories of explorers, animals, and ancient ecosystems. Each discovery offers priceless scientific and historical insights, but also reminds us of the fragile balance between human curiosity and nature's might. So Bell's story is more than a cold case solved. It's a lesson about respect for the dangers of exploration, for the environment that sustains us, and for the history frozen beneath the ice. It urges us to be cautious, responsible, and aware as we continue to push the boundaries of discovery. If you found this story compelling, make sure to subscribe to the channel for more deep dives into mysteries and history uncovered. Also, I'd love to know what time is it where you are right now, and where are you watching this story from? Drop your answers in the comments below, and let's connect over these incredible stories from around the world. November 16th, 1969. The sun barely rose over the winding curves of Mulholland Drive, casting long shadows through the dense California brush. A teenage birdwatcher, curious and alone, wandered deeper into a quiet ravine, seeking the simple beauty of songbirds and solitude. But instead of peace, he found something chilling. There, hidden beneath tangled branches and fallen leaves, lay the body of a young woman. Her eyes closed forever, her life brutally stolen. No identification, no clues, just silence. For decades, she was only a number. Jane Doe number 59, a ghost haunting the files of unsolved cases, lost to time and memory. She was given a name by those who cared: Sherry Doe. Her story was buried beneath the earth, forgotten by most, but never by those who sought justice. Who was she? What dark path led to this lonely ravine? And how did it take nearly 50 years to finally bring her name back from the shadows? In this second story, we unravel the haunting mystery of Reet Jurvetson's Sherry Doe and the truth that lay hidden for almost half a century. When investigators found the young woman's body, they estimated her age to be between 20 and 23 years old. So young. The brutality of the crime was staggering. She had been stabbed 157 times. That number alone is chilling. It's hard not to ask, What kind of violence drives someone to stab a person that many times? The ferocity suggests rage beyond reason, but we don't yet know why. The defensive wounds on her hands revealed a desperate fight for survival. I can almost picture her fighting against the darkness, trying to protect herself with everything she had. It's a haunting image, one that humanizes a victim who is otherwise reduced to a number in cold case files. She was fully clothed when discovered, no signs of struggle like torn clothing, no personal belongings to identify her. That must have been incredibly frustrating for those trying to solve her case. No ID, no clues to who she was or where she came from. In 1969, forensic science was limited, so the lack of identification left the police with very little to go on. They created forensic sketches, hoping someone might recognize her. Public appeals were made, but silence met their calls. I wonder how many times families looked at missing persons reports, wondering if this could be their daughter, their sister, but found no match. The pain of that uncertainty must have been immense. Then there's the location. Mulholland Drive, famous for its winding views and tragic stories, was the site where her body was found. Just months earlier, the Manson family had shocked the world with their own brutal murders nearby. Naturally, investigators wondered if this was connected. Could it be the same killers or a copycat? But no direct evidence ever linked this young woman's murder to the Manson crimes. That association with such a notorious case probably complicated things. Imagine the media frenzy, the fear gripping the community, and how her case might have been overshadowed by the infamy of the Manson murders. From where I stand, this act of the story shows how complex and frustrating cold cases can be. The victim's identity was locked away by time and limited technology, and the nearby chaos of one of America's darkest crime waves didn't help. This is just the beginning of the story. There's much more to uncover about who she was and how her name eventually resurfaced, something that would take decades to happen. For decades, the mystery of Jane Doe number 59 remained frozen in time, a haunting enigma with no answers. Then, in 2015, an unexpected spark reignited hope, not from a detective's new lead, but through the digital world's quiet, unlikely channels. Reet Jurvetson's sister, Anne, was living her life far removed from that ravine on Mulholland Drive, when friends alerted her to an online mortuary photograph that looked eerily familiar. She was struck with disbelief. Could the unknown woman, long whispered about in cold case circles, be her own sister? The photograph was stark and untouched, somber image capturing the stillness of death, decades old, yet still profoundly human. Anne's heart must have raced with a mix of hope and fear. The resemblance was uncanny, but seeing is not always believing, especially with something so deeply personal and painful. This moment, so simple, yet so monumental, showcases the unpredictable paths cold cases often take. It wasn't a sudden breakthrough from new evidence or a witness stepping forward. Instead, it was a chance encounter with a photograph circulating in the vast ocean of the internet that would crack open the case. But identification requires more than visual resemblance. Law enforcement moved with careful precision. Advances in forensic science that were unimaginable in 1969 became the key to unlocking her identity. DNA samples taken from the remains were compared with Anne's genetic material, providing the scientific certainty that years of investigation had lacked. When the tests confirmed the match, it brought an end to decades of uncertainty. Yet, it's impossible to imagine this moment as purely joyous. For Anne and her family, relief intertwined with grief. To finally know the fate of a loved one offers closure, but also reopens wounds that had long been tender. The confirmation underscored not just the power of science, but the resilience of those left behind, waiting, hoping, never giving up on the possibility of answers. It highlights how even the coldest, most impenetrable mysteries can yield to time, technology, and determination. Reflecting on this, I'm reminded of how many cases like Reet's remain unsolved, not for lack of trying, but because the tools weren't there yet. And yet, as technology progresses, the past can speak again, voices long silenced finding a way back through the noise. Anne's story, and the slow unraveling of her sister's identity, is a testament to patience and persistence in the face of decades of silence. It's a powerful reminder that no matter how much time passes, there is always hope for truth. To understand the tragedy, we must first look beyond the mystery to the life behind the nameless shadow. Reet Jurvetson was born in Sweden, a daughter of Estonian refugees who had fled the turmoil of war-torn Europe. Her early years were marked by the upheaval and displacement many refugees know too well, but also by a quiet resilience that would come to define her. Her family eventually settled in Canada, a country of vast landscapes and fresh starts. Growing up in this new world, Reet developed a spirit of adventure and independence. She wasn't content to live a life confined by borders or expectations. By the time she was 19, she had already begun carving out her own path, a path that would lead her far from the safety of home. In 1969, she traveled to California, drawn by the allure of Los Angeles, a city that promised endless possibility. There, she intended to meet a man known only as John or Jean, a figure shrouded in mystery, but important enough to inspire such a journey. It's striking how such a young woman, thrown into a new and sprawling city, maintained the courage to pursue her desires despite the uncertainties. It's easy to romanticize the idea of a young traveler chasing dreams, but beneath that is a complex mix of hope, longing, and perhaps loneliness. The last tangible glimpse into Reet's life comes in the form of a postcard, dated October 31st, 1969, sent to her family back home. In it, she described her experiences in Los Angeles, her words filled with the excitement and awe of a young woman exploring new horizons. That postcard now stands as a poignant reminder of the vibrant life abruptly ended. It was a message from a sister and daughter, a young woman reaching out across the miles, unaware that this would be her final communication. Reflecting on this, I'm reminded how easily lives like Reet's can become lost stories. She was not just a victim, but a person with dreams, connections, and a place in a family. It's important, as we unravel her mystery, to hold on to these human details, because they remind us of what's truly at stake in cold cases like hers. From the moment Jane Doe number 59 was discovered, the investigation faced a maze of uncertainties. One lead consistently drew attention: the man named John or Jean, reportedly the reason Reet had traveled to Los Angeles. His elusive presence cast a long shadow over the case, yet he remained frustratingly difficult to trace. Investigators pursued this thread with determination. Who was John? Was he a friend, a lover, or something more sinister? Accounts varied, and official records gave little clarity. Some suggested he was someone Reet had met through friends, or perhaps even a fleeting romance. But no definitive evidence linked him directly to the crime. In the absence of solid testimony, detectives examined the physical clues left behind. Near the site where her body was found, items like a pair of glasses and fragments of clothing bearing distinctive tags were collected. These artifacts offered potential insight into her last moments' small puzzle pieces amid a larger, baffling picture. Yet each lid seemed to dissolve into dead ends. The glasses, while unique, had no identifiable owner. Clothing tags were traced to stores, but that trail too ran cold. It was as if the crime scene guarded its secrets jealously. The investigation was hampered by the lack of witnesses. The secluded ravine on Mulholland Drive was rarely frequented, especially at night. No one had seen or heard anything that could definitively place a suspect at the scene. Without an eyewitness account, the case relied heavily on circumstantial evidence, a precarious position for any investigator. Moreover, the technology of the time limited forensic analysis. Blood spatter patterns, fingerprints, and other vital clues could not be examined with the precision we expect today. What might have been a breakthrough now remained just an unresolved fragment of a larger mystery. As the years passed, the case grew colder, but the theories persisted. Was John involved? Was the murder a crime of passion or something more calculated? Some speculated links to other unsolved murders, yet no pattern was conclusively established. What strikes me is the overwhelming sense of frustration that must have gripped the detectives, being so close, yet so far from the truth. The relentless pursuit of justice meeting silence at every turn. And for the family waiting for answers, this void of information must have been unbearable. This act of the story leaves us immersed in uncertainty, with only fragments to hold on to, and a lingering question. What more could have been uncovered if only a single piece of the puzzle had been found? The story of Reet Jurvetson's identification shines a powerful light on how far forensic science has come since the late 1960s. In those earlier decades, the tools available to investigators were limited, often forcing them to rely on eyewitnesses, circumstantial evidence, and basic forensic methods. Today, however, advances like DNA testing and expansive digital databases have revolutionized cold case investigations, transforming what once seemed impossible into achievable breakthroughs. Reet's case perfectly illustrates this shift. Without DNA technology, her identity might have remained a mystery indefinitely, her story forever trapped in obscurity. The ability to extract genetic material from decades-old remains and match it with living relatives has rewritten countless chapters of cold cases worldwide. It's a reminder that science can offer justice not only for victims, but for families left in agonizing uncertainty. Speaking of families, the emotional toll of such prolonged ambiguity is staggering. Imagine living with unanswered questions for years, decades, even never knowing the fate of a loved one, or whether they are safe, lost, or worse. Reet's family endured this painful limbo, caught between hope and despair, living with a silent grief that no words can fully capture. Their journey to closure was long and arduous, marked by fragments of hope, public appeals, sketches, whispered leads, and deep disappointment. The eventual confirmation of her identity brought a bittersweet relief. It offered answers, but reopened old wounds. This duality is common in cold cases, where closure can be both healing and deeply painful. Beyond the science and the personal stories, this case prompts us to consider broader ethical questions. How do we balance the quest for identification and truth with respect for privacy, especially in the digital age, where DNA data and images circulate widely? Who holds responsibility for unidentified remains, and how should authorities approach these sensitive cases with dignity? There's also the question of resources and priorities. How do law enforcement agencies decide which cold cases receive attention and which languish? The story of Jane Doe number 59 invites reflection on how society values victims, especially those marginalized by time, geography, or circumstance. From my perspective, these considerations emphasize that cold cases are not just puzzles to solve, but human stories that demand compassion, respect, and ongoing commitment. They challenge us to look beyond the headlines and statistics, to remember the lives behind the mysteries. As we continue to uncover stories like Reet's, we're reminded that progress in forensic science is inseparable from the ethical and emotional dimensions that come with it, complex layers that make each case profoundly human.